everyone, welcome to NHM Live. My name is Camilla and I'll be your host, and today we're taking you down into the depths of the basement of the museum to the tank room. The tank room is a really special part of the museum's spirit collection, and no, that's not just where we keep our alcohol for the staff parties. The spirit collection is where we house about 22 million different animal specimens in preserved spirit. Let's check out the tank room. Hello, welcome to the tank room. As you can see behind me, it's wall-to-wall specimens in glass jars, and some of them are too big for the jars and we have to keep them in these massive tanks behind me. And in a few minutes, we're going to ask one of our curators to open up one of these tanks and show you a couple of the giants inside. But for now, let's join Alison and Ollie upstairs back in the studio to find out a bit more about the facility.
Hello and welcome. I'm Alison. I'll be your host in the studio today. Now, as you've just heard from Camilla, today is a very special episode of NHM Live. We are taking you behind the scenes to see some of the very cool stuff that is in our spirit collection. Now, as ever, we are live, so if you have any questions or comments at all, please do post those to us. We would love to hear from you. We'll get through as many of your questions as we can. Now, I'm delighted to be joined in the studio today by Ollie Crimmen. So, Ollie, thank you so much for speaking to us today.
Okay.
Tell us what you do here at the museum.
I'm a fish curator, so I look after a very large collection of the most specious group of vertebrates on Earth, and I keep the specimens for science. I get the information from them for people all over the world, and I help build the collections as well.
You are very, very familiar with our collections, aren't you?
Yeah.
Now, tell us about the tank room itself. What exactly is it, and how long has the museum had that facility?
Well, the tank room's a special area in the collections where the larger alcohol preserved material is kept. So we've got miles of shelving with smaller bottles and whole specimens preserved in alcohol in closed cabinets. But in the tank room you see the larger things in big cylinders, and the very big things are in tanks. So it's quite a spectacular part of the collection.
It really is, and it's had some quite famous visitors over the years, hasn't it?
Sure. Yes, it was opened by the Queen in 2002, and we've had some quite prestigious filming sets take place in there. But yes, we've had, of course, from the world of science, we've had major researchers come from all over the world.
And what sorts of specimens are actually down in the tank room?
Well, because it's the larger end of the whole spirit specimens, you've got very big fishes, giant snakes, turtles, that sort of thing. The larger specimens that we want to keep whole in fluid.
And now the tank room itself is impressive enough, but it's just part of our spirit collection, isn't it? So
yes.
How large is that collection?
Well, it goes on for kilometres of shelving, as I say, on 7 floors of this huge building. And in actual fact, in the tank room, you're just looking at one half of one of the floors. And then, of course, the museum collections extend right across the museum site, and even in outstations. We've got millions of specimens, 800 million specimens in all. A lot of them are dried, but the spirit specimens in the Darwin Centre are the state of the art as far as we're concerned.
And what is the spirit that they're actually preserved in? Is it just alcohol?
It is alcohol, the same as you would get in an alcoholic drink, but denatured with a small amount of methyl alcohol. Because this makes it undrinkable, it's cheaper for sort of industrial uses, and it means we can order it by the hundreds of gallons that we need each year.
And we really do, don't we?
We do.
Now, what's the main benefit of preserving something in spirit rather than taxidermy?
Well, if you take a dried, stuffed or just dried specimen, you can see I can lift this up quite easily. It's lost a lot of what we would count as information for a modern study. So you can see the basic external features. Sometimes the colours are painted back onto a specimen. On the side, which is mounted on the wall, it's not so pretty. And features like the skeleton and musculature, which we would use in a modern study, they've gone. So in spirit, the whole body's preserved. We've not only got all the anatomical details that we want, but also the tissues are there for techniques in study that we haven't even come up with yet. So nowadays, of course, we're taking molecular samples from specimens. So
of course.
To have as the body as complete as possible makes it more valuable for science.
Fantastic. Now we've got a couple of questions from our Facebook viewers. So we've got a question about the actual spirit. Is it alcohol or formaldehyde? Was formaldehyde ever used?
Formaldehyde was used from about 1900 to actually fix the specimens.
Okay.
Unfortunately, one of the side effects was that it didn't do DNA a lot of good, but we didn't know about DNA at the time. It does prevent any further biological activity in the specimen, and it makes it stable for us. Then the alcohol is transferred to alcohol, and that's what keeps the specimen for, well, we've been doing it for 250 years and they're in good condition, so it works.
Absolutely, as we'll see. And James on Facebook is asking, what's the largest specimen we have down there?
There's lots of arguments about it. In the tank room, if you stretch the giant squid out, you get a very long specimen. We'd say that's not really the bulk that we're looking for. We'd probably, we might nominate our Greenland shark, because that's a very massive specimen.
Absolutely. Now, speaking of the Greenland shark, this might be a good opportunity to actually go over to the tank room where I believe Camilla is. Now, I believe that they have been opening up one of the massive tanks so that we can have a look at what's inside.
Right.
So it's quite a process, isn't it, opening up those tanks?
Yes, they've got heavy lids on that actually compress a seal around the rim of the tank, because we need that weight to keep the seal intact and to stop the alcohol evaporating.
And we can see here that we're actually lifting up the lid.
Yes.
Now, how heavy is that lid?
They're all different weights because the tanks are different sizes, but they're all a bit too heavy for us to lift. So we've got, in this new facility, we've got the great advantage of this winch, which can take off all the tanks in the room by moving that beam around. So yeah, this has saved our backs anyway.
Absolutely, and there's a very good reason we don't have the sound on, isn't there?
Yes, the chains and the hoist actually make quite a lot of clank. It's quite deafening.
So they've got the tank open. Let's now go over to Camilla and see exactly what they've got inside.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the tank room. I'm joined by one of our senior fish curators here, James McLean, and he has very kindly taken the lid off one of these massive tanks. So this is a very cool, very rare opportunity to have a peek inside. It's certainly something that the public don't normally have the chance to do. It's quite a smell going on. You can't smell it from where you are, so that's fine, but just to let you know, it does pong. Okay, so James, let's get stuck in. I'm going to ask you to dip your hands in and lift up one of the bigger fish specimens within this tank.
For a long time, I think this specimen's been mentioned already. This, for a long time, was our biggest fish specimen in alcohol. This is a swordfish.
Wow.
We've got here. But
Nice,
then,
okay.
just a few years ago, we were very lucky when this beauty washed up in just very near Newcastle.
Okay, so some people may
Swordfish
recognise this
attacking it.
animal for being in the news a couple of years ago, as it was established as the longest living vertebrate. So what are we looking at here?
This is a Greenland shark. They also call them sleeper sharks. And yeah, there was a study that was done where they analysed the isotopes in the lens of the eye of the Greenland shark. And from those, they estimated that they had a few sharks that they did this with, and they estimated that a 5-metre long Greenland shark would be about 400 years old.
Wow.
Which would make this one here at least over 100.
And it might be hard for viewers to kind of get a sense of scale, but how long is this specimen?
So this specimen is 2.6 metres long, roughly. So the tail is over there under the rest of the swordfish.
Okay, but they can get bigger, obviously.
Oh yeah, yeah. The really big full-grown adult will be over 6 metres long. Yeah.
Okay, so that's comparable to, say, something like a great white shark, even bigger.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And we always think of great whites as being these really formidable, agile apex predators, but the interesting is Greenland sharks, although they're a lot slower moving, they're also considered apex predators?
Well, they are. I mean, a pretty big, full-grown Greenland shark needs a lot of food, so they do eat quite a lot of large prey items, but unlike the great white shark, which is a really fast, active predator, these are very, very sluggish, so mostly the big things that they're eating are already dead. So when a whale dies and sinks to the seabed, the Greenland shark's usually one of the first things on the scene to sort of start tearing into that lovely rotten flesh.
And speaking of which, I wonder if we could maybe get a little bit closer to the mouth region, have a look at those teeth, because if we look at the upper and lower jaw, they're quite distinct, and the teeth on the lower jaw, they look like they're facing in opposing directions. Why is that?
They are. So I don't know how well you can see it, but on this side of the jaw, the teeth are facing this way, and on this side, they're facing that way. And the teeth in the upper jaw are actually quite different. They're quite sort of spiky and nail-like, whereas these are much more like blades. And this helps the shark when it's ripping into those dead whales I was talking about earlier. So what it does is it gets a really good grip with its upper jaw, and then it starts to do this sort of rocking motion like that, which just turns its whole lower jaw into a saw and helps it to shear off those huge chunks of flesh, which it loves so much.
Wow, okay, so it might not be a great white, but it's still pretty formidable. Okay, so we'll give your arms a rest. I'm getting the sense that that's fairly heavy. I'm going to ask you to pull up one more fish from this tank, which is a bit of a celebrity fish just down this end. So this one actually has a name, right?
That's right. This is Stanley the Sturgeon.
Stanley
Yes.
the
So this is our second biggest fish in alcohol after the Greenland shark.
Wow. So how long is this roughly?
So this is a little bit shorter. It's about 2.3 meters long, I think, something like that.
Okay, so Stanley is a bit of a celebrity in that there's a really nice story behind this specimen. Can you tell us about
Yeah,
it?
it was a very weird saga. So Stanley was caught in 2004 by a Welsh fisherman, and there is a law that states if you catch a sturgeon, you are obliged to offer it to Her Majesty the Queen. So this guy dutifully got in touch with Buckingham Palace and said, I've caught a sturgeon. And they weren't that bothered for some reason. And
They've got enough sturgeons, that's fine.
It's overflowing with them. So they said he could dispose of it as he saw fit. And then he tried to sell it. And there is another law that says it is illegal to sell European sturgeons. They're protected. So when the police got wind of that, they moved in to confiscate Stanley. But before they got there, a fish market person had bought Stanley and put him in the back of a van and driven off with him. And he got in touch with us and gave Stanley to us. And it looked like there was still going to be a court case. But then it discovered that Stanley isn't a European sturgeon. He's an American sturgeon. And it is, there's no law prohibiting sale of American sturgeon in Britain, so that was the end of the prosecution.
He was okay.
It was all right, yeah.
So what's the law about? What is it about a sturgeon that makes it so valuable?
Well, it's their eggs, really. So that's where caviar comes from. The sort of historical populations of sturgeons, the sort of the ones that most people know about, are around Russia and Iran, and that's where the big caviar markets are. And there's a huge kind of sturgeon that you get there called a beluga. And 1 kilogram of beluga caviar costs now around about £20,000. And of course, the bigger the market is, the more sturgeon are being caught, and the rarer they become, the more valuable the caviar becomes. So, yes, they're in quite a bad way at the moment. Yeah.
But we're very pleased to have Stanley in our collection.
We are, and it seems to be, weirdly, that sturgeon are becoming more common as far as we're concerned. We've had 3 sturgeon in the past 3 years, slightly smaller ones up at the other end of the tank there. So that's possibly a positive sign. We'll have to wait and see.
Is it quite rare to see them off the coast of the UK?
Pretty rare, yeah. I mean, until those 3 popped up, we hadn't had any apart from Stanley for a long time. So yeah, they're very, very occasional visitors.
Okay, we've had a question from Stephen Grant on Facebook. I hope the answer is yes, but I have a feeling it might be no. Can we see the coelacanth? Is there a coelacanth in here?
If you turn around, Nathan, you might be able to see it at the end of the parcel. It's in a tank there. There's actually 2. There's one in the brown massive jar is a coelacanth, and the tank next to it is also a coelacanth. I don't know if you can zoom in on those.
Nice, okay. All right, thank you so much, James, and Callum Artis for helping us out. We'll let you have a sit down, you can have a rest. We're going to go back to the studio with Alison and Ollie now, because they have some lovely historical specimens to show you as well. Please keep your questions and comments coming through.
Thanks to Camilla and James. It's great to see those massive tanks open, isn't it?
It is.
Now, these specimens, they have obviously enormous scientific, but also historical value as well. How far back does our spirit collection date?
Well, spirit specimens go back to 1760s, so middle of the 18th century.
Wow.
And they're in good condition now. So this was caught in 1768, this fish, on Captain Cook's first voyage, and it's quite robust and available for study.
Absolutely.
So we know it works.
We've got a question from Stephen Grant actually on Facebook asking what is the oldest preserved fish specimen? Would it be that one?
We actually think some from the collection of Albertus Saber are older than this, but the data that is associated with the specimen is incomplete, so we can't actually put an exact date on it.
Oh, that's a shame.
But certainly in spirit, the oldest specimens are at the beginning of the 18th century, yeah.
It's very impressive. You can see how well the technique works.
Yes.
Does the alcohol evaporate? Do you have to top up?
Yes, that's the problem with alcohol, of course. It's flammable and it evaporates, and getting the right containers to stop that evaporation and keeping our storerooms at a nice cool temperature helps. And using those best methods, we can keep those the evaporation right down. But occasionally a lid doesn't fit quite as well as we'd like, or becomes dislodged, or a tail fin gets trapped in the stopper, and then you do get evaporation very quickly. So we have to keep a close eye on the collections, and it's evaporation that we're fighting.
I can imagine. Now we've got another fantastic specimen here, haven't we? This octopus. Can you tell us about this?
Yes, that's a lovely specimen because relatively modern compared with the Cook specimen. It's from Charles Darwin's voyage. It was caught in 1832, an octopus, and he made some, because Darwin was a great note taker and writer, and he gives information about the specimens that he sees in his journals. You can actually read what he was thinking about this animal, and this individual he kept in a saltwater container alive on the ship, the Beagle.
Oh, wow.
And made some observations on it, did some little tests on it. And so it's nice that we've got the actual specimen that he was writing about.
That's great. I have heard this lovingly referred to as Darwin's pet octopus.
Yes.
So that's possibly why.
Yes, I think he did refer to it as a pet.
It's absolutely beautiful, and again, very, very well preserved.
Yes.
It's absolutely amazing. We've got some more questions coming through. What are the labels made of? That's a very good question from Facebook.
Yes, the labels on the outsides of the jars are sticky tape. But we found that they can peel off, and we get all sorts of conditions, atmospheric conditions that make them unstable. So we'd like to put a label inside the bottle, and we found that good paper made with linen fibres, not wood pulp, actually seems to last for a very long time in the alcohol. So the alcohol is preserving the specimen and our label as well, keeping the data and the specimen together. Very important. Very,
very important, absolutely. And we've got a question from Ethan on Facebook. He asks, how are the different specimens categorised within the Spirit collection? Are they organised in a specific way?
They are. They're organised according to our understanding of the classification of fishes. But you imagine that changes.
Of course. And
we can't keep rearranging the specimens on the shelves to match their modern classification. But we are greatly helped out in modern times by databases, which mean that we don't have to keep moving everything around, but we can relate the modern classification to what the arrangement is on the shelves, because the important thing is to be able to find it. That's the thing, and with kilometres of shelving, as long as you can find your specimen, that's the great thing.
Absolutely. Now, it's amazing to think that these specimens are the very specimens that Darwin himself collected,
yes,
analysed, dissected. Do these older specimens still have use today?
Sure. I mean, you could use them for a limited dissection or tissue sampling today. We would judge that in every case, because obviously if you've got really historically important specimens like this, you would want to match up what somebody's requesting to do with it, with being able to keep it for another 100 years. But they are here for science, they're used by scientists all the time, and we try to say yes to any scientific investigation. So that's our job as curators, to weigh that up.
Well, it's lovely to see this historical side to collection, but let's now go back down to Camilla and the tank room, because I believe they have another slightly more unusual specimen to show us.
Hello again, I am now joined by one of our principal curators of hepatology, Jeff Stryker. And for those of you who maybe don't know what hepatology is...
the study of amphibians and reptiles.
Excellent, okay, and this has got to be, without a doubt, the biggest amphibian I saw a newt a couple of weeks ago, and I was pretty impressed by that. It was about that long. This is obviously on a slightly different scale.
This is a little bit bigger. This is actually the largest living species of amphibian. This is
Okay.
These are 2 specimens of the Chinese giant salamander.
Okay, the Chinese giant salamander, and I'm assuming it's called that because is it endemic to China? It's only found in China?
It is only found in China. There's potentially an introduced population in Japan, but as far as we know, it's endemic to the Yangtze, Pearl, and Yellow River basins in China.
Right, okay, and this actual specimen was alive at ZSL Zoo, not too far away.
That's right, London Zoo, yeah.
Right, so how did we acquire this specimen?
Well, so many specimens are donated to us by the zoo. After an animal dies, the vets will do a post-mortem on it, and after they conduct that analysis, we'll take the specimen and preserve it long-term. So if they ever need to come back and visit the specimen, examine its tissues again to potentially help the spread of disease with other animals, help stop the spread of disease to other animals, this specimen will always be here at the museum that they can use as a reference to help keep their animals safe. And it also adds a really valuable research specimen to our collection for other purposes as well.
Excellent, very valuable in your eyes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm a bit biased, but yeah.
Okay, so let's take a closer look at this specimen, and let's start with the very obvious cut marks
Sure.
on the head over here. So why are these cut marks there?
So this is the result of the post-mortem examination that I mentioned earlier. The cuts on the head are where the veterinarians went in to take a sample of the brain tissues to look for any brain-associated diseases. And you can see these other cuts here, punctures to take different types of tissues to help them assess what might have been wrong with the animal.
Okay, and do you know were they able to figure out why it passed away?
Well, with this particular animal, it was inconclusive, but there were some very strange things about this giant salamander compared to most other giant salamanders. For example, if you look at the head of this giant salamander, you'll see it's quite difficult to see its eyes. It actually had very puffy skin around the eyes to where it probably couldn't actually see. And if you look at this smaller specimen of a Chinese giant salamander I have here, you see although the eyes are very small, they are visible. And so one of the things is that there were probably just some very different things going on with this animal. So even though we don't know why it ultimately died, it was a very different individual.
It does look like quite a chunky, a beefy specimen
yes.
as well.
Yeah, quite large.
Okay, so I've been saying he. How do we know that this was a he?
Well, part of that is the size of this animal. So males of this species get larger than the females. That's one way, but also because we have done a dissection of the animal, we've actually seen its testes, seen its gonads, and so that's the way that we've identified it as a male.
Okay, and male Chinese giant salamanders, a bit of a mouthful, they exhibit some quite nice parenting behavior, don't they?
That's right, yeah. A lot of amphibians actually do this, but Chinese giant salamanders have great parental care. They're great dads. They'll actually occupy a den of sorts, this little cavity underneath the water, where the female will come and lay the eggs, and the father salamander will actually stay around those eggs after the female leaves. And if any other salamander or a potential predator in the water comes and tries to eat the eggs, he'll fend it off, he'll attack the predator. Also, if any of the eggs die and get a bacterial infection or something, he'll eat those eggs to keep the bacterial infection from spreading throughout the clutch. So they're actually really great dads.
Good protective dad.
Yeah, indeed.
So now this species, the Chinese giant salamander, was in the news not that long ago. I think
right.
maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago or so, because they're very highly endangered. What are the main threats to this species?
So the main threats, like many amphibians, are habitat degradation, but there's kind of a unique one with this species in that it's throughout China farmed. It's farmed for use as a food item, and these farms occur all over China, but the farms are populated with salamanders probably from one source population. And so it's kind of a unique conservation issue where you have salamanders from one population that have been bred in the hundreds to thousands that periodically escape from these different farms. And when they escape, they bring with them all of the diseases and the genes that they have from that population. And they introduce them potentially into a naive population of giant salamanders. So it really is a unique situation where they're trying to keep salamanders from getting out of these farms so that they can protect as much genetic diversity and guard against disease of the native populations that still exist.
Right, so a lot more work still to be done with the salamanders.
Absolutely, yeah.
Excellent. Okay, we've had a question come through from Cecile on Facebook. What specimen would you like to have in your collection? So perhaps one that you don't have that you'd like.
Oh, well, we have a lot of specimens here. I mean, I think I'm always excited when any specimen arrives, just because particularly now with the way that a lot of the techniques we're using have advanced, like, for example, whereas about 10 or 20 years ago, we had a really hard time getting DNA out of these specimens, this small salamander that I have here is part of a collaborative research program we have with the London Zoo, where we've actually taken small bits of tissue and been able to sequence sequenced the whole mitochondrial genome out of it. And so for advances like that, I'm excited to get just about any specimen. I have a slight bias towards frogs and snakes, but that's just my own interest. But yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Jeff, and thank you for showing us this amazing specimen. There was a question that came through earlier, and I think it might have been for our fish curator, James, which was, what's your favourite specimen and why? And that's a perfect segue to go back to Alison and Ollie in the studio, because they have one final specimen to show you.
Thank you, Camilla. Welcome back, guys. Yes, we do have one final specimen to show you, and it's a great question from Cecile. What's your favourite specimen? Ollie?
That is a good question, because it happens to be the one we picked to show you.
That's very, very lucky. It's almost like we planned it.
And it's a deep sea anglerfish.
Wow.
With a luminous lure on the head, living in the dark. And this is the female, and the male, the adult male, is a tiny little parasitic male that finds her, bites into her skin, and then remains there so that he's with her when they both come into breeding condition.
Wow. I mean, it's an impressive creature. It looks to me a little bit like a giant baked potato. Is that how it would look in life?
Pretty much. The alcohol has probably made it a little less spherical than it was, but it wouldn't have had colour. It's living in the dark, and there's no point in having dramatic colour patterns.
Of course. So these are a deep sea fish.
Yes.
How deep do they live? Do we know?
About 1,000 metres.
Wow.
And with the light being the only means by which you would detect the animal was there. Unless you're a male, he finds the female by a scent trail she leaves in the dark.
It's really, really impressive, isn't it?
Yeah.
So how easy is it to study deep sea fish like this in life?
Well, this is an example of an area of building the collections which is relatively new, because coming from great pressure at depth, it's very difficult to get these to the surface, and they're rare in museum collections, and we're still discovering them, and we're still working out what their biology is. We can't really observe them easily in their natural habitat. There are cameras, and we're getting some film now, but still there's a lot we don't know about these.
Which makes these specimens very, very important, doesn't it?
It does.
So what sorts of things can we learn from studying specimens like this?
Well, we can look at the anatomy, we can x-ray it, we can scan it, and this specimen has been scanned. So that way we can explore some of the internal anatomy. We could open the stomach and see what the fish had been eating, so we can learn a little bit about its biology. And we might find a big fish curled up in the guts like this, because these anglerfishes tend to have very elasticated stomachs. They don't miss out on a meal when they find one. And so there's various features of the body that we can look at, but of course we can take tissue samples as well and start to get a more refined picture of how these things are related to each other.
It's wonderful. They're a fantastic scientific resource, but they're also a great learning resource as well, aren't they? Because most of us would never see anything like this in the flesh or in real life.
No, that's right. Some television films put them on the map for a general audience, but there's still nothing quite like seeing the actual specimen. And each specimen, of course, has its own story about how it was recovered and where it was found.
Absolutely, and people can visit our spirit collection themselves, can't they? They can come to the museum and take a tour.
Sure, and the tour actually goes through the tank room, so very spectacular.
It's well worth doing, it's well worth doing. Well, we are sadly running out of time. I could talk about these specimens forever, but sadly we're out of time. Ollie, thank you so much for coming to talk to us today. And also thank you to James and to Jeff as well. And thank you very much to our viewers for all of your questions and comments. Now, if there were any questions we didn't get to, don't worry. Our scientists will be online for a few more minutes, so we'll try and answer those questions that we didn't manage to get to. And do, of course, join us again next time, where we'll be talking about life in the dark.